Karen, it's really great to speak to you. I know you're a portfolio Ned, and I know for a lot of people watching this, they'll be keen to learn a bit about your experience. So to kick us off, could you tell us a bit about your journey to becoming a non-exec?
Ooh. So I suppose I suppose the idea came from, I was head of strategy and CEO in an insurance company. And it was really the role of head of strategy, change, innovation. I like the big picture stuff. I like kind of, how all the parts move together, the levers, how an organization is run. And there was an opportunity for me to do the charter director with the Institute of Directors. So I went along to that. Now, I'd done a lot of, I guess, development of a diploma in leadership, and I've lots of different things, but this was very, very different than anything I had ever done. And I likened it to, it was a completely different paradigm. It was a completely different way of thinking. So as a NED, you're trained, or with the Institute of Directors anyway, you're trained to think in a much more strategic and much more high level way. So as an executive, you're very focused on, execution, what needs to be done, when does it need to be done by, how do we get it done, plan, execute. Whereas, or in the IOD, you're being trained to think about long-term, 10-year horizon scanning the future of the business, different shareholders, different stakeholders. So it was a complete different paradigm. So I loved that. And I had been operating at board level as an executive director, as CEO, and I'd had PCFs with the central bank and the PRA. But this was, I suppose I hadn't really appreciated what the INEDs were bringing to it, because I was so focused on the executive role. So I really loved that. And I did my certificate and my diploma. And after that, I just thought, it's something I'd like to pursue. But I was still working full time. So, I had a thought about what I might do. So I said I'd volunteer to be on, or try and find one or two boards that I could volunteer on and kind of get experience as an ed. So I did that. I worked on the board of a large credit union. I also was chair of Eco UNESCO, which was an environmental NGO. And then for my sins, I probably took on a little bit too much. I went onto the board of the National College of Art and Design in Dublin. So they were phenomenal experiences in that, they're unpaid roles, yet the complexity of the businesses, there's always a big challenge if you work in voluntary boards or, education or state boards. Well, not so much state, but educational boards. There's always a big challenge because you're trying to do the job. You're trying to have a governance overlay, which costs money and resources, but you don't have the money or the resources. So it's always a bit of a scramble. So it's a very different role being a NED in a voluntary organization or an education or any kind of an NGO, because you're doing much more than you would normally do. So if you're a NED on a bank, for example, you have a chief risk officer, you have a chief financial officer, you have a head of projects. All these people are doing the jobs and they're simply reporting. You're kind of setting direction, but they're reporting to you. But if you're on the board of a not-for-profit, you're saying this needs to be done, and everyone's looking around going, well, who can we possibly get to do it? So in a way, it's riskier. And as a result, the experience is really, really good, because you get to see, you get to experience lots of different things. So for example, the art college I was involved in had real issues. The accounts hadn't been done for a couple of years, and they couldn't get staff because they didn't have the budget for it. There was a whole new governance overlay, the state code that had been put in place, and they simply didn't have the competence because they'd never come across it before, nor did they have the resources to do it. So it was a big kind of mess to try and fix. But that was really, really, I suppose, probably one of the best experiences I've had, even though it was a huge heavy lift. It was a lot of work. It was quite stressful, but I probably learned more on that one board than I did, on so many combined. So I was kind of doing that for a while, balancing that with my full-time job. And it got to a point that I must admit I was exhausted. I have a tendency, or I used to have a tendency, to say yes to too many things, and just to wear myself out completely. And then I kind of pull back completely and then go in and then gradually build up too many things. So I suppose I recognize that in myself. And my husband he was headhunted for a job up in Belfast. We were in Dublin and he was headhunted up to Belfast, and we kind of thought, gosh, is this something we want to do? We agreed we would. And it was an opportunity for me then to step out completely of everything I was in, have a think about what I wanted to do. We've a 9-year-old, so we needed to get her set up in education and settled into a new place. So what I did was I took a few months off, got her settled and sorted, and said, right, now I'm going to focus on just full-time NED roles because it's what I love doing. And I was very lucky in the north, in that you don't, it's funny, in Dublin and in other places, it can be very much who you know, especially, I come from a background of finance and IT, and not for profit, and it can be very much who you know. It's a tap on the shoulder. It's not an open, transparent process. Whereas in Belfast and in Northern Ireland, it is much more open and transparent. And I don't know whether that's the background or the culture of the place, but I suppose I had the opportunity for, here's my experience and here's the role. Do I match or not?
Yeah.
Rather than kind of hoping to know somebody. So, I mean, it's been fabulous for me from that perspective. So the first role,
that's brilliant to hear, by the way, Karen, because that's one of the things that we set out to try and challenge, was that, this can't all be about a tap on the shoulder. How are you ever going to change the mix on boards if it's just people going to those they know?
It's funny, I'd had that conversation with people in Dublin, like, how do you break in? And so many people had said to me, it just takes ages. And once you found your first one, and then you've got your second or third, suddenly it will all happen. And I just remember thinking, gosh, that's odd. That's a funny way of building, but that is the way it is in Dublin anyway. I think it's changing.
Yeah.
I certainly think it's changing in financial services, because I think the central bank is applying pressure to make that change happen. So that's great to see. But I think that was already there in Belfast. That was just, well, certainly Progressive have a very transparent process. And also AiPOS.
Do you want to mention, for those that don't know, what Progressive is?
Oh, apologies. Progressive is a building society. It's in the top 10 building societies in the UK, but it's the only Indigenous financial services organisation in Belfast. So it has a really kind of strong history and ethos of mutual financial services. And that's the background I come from. So I just saw that, they advertised the position, and I just thought, oh gosh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Applied, and very serendipitously, they were looking for somebody with digital transformation experience and who had a mutual background. So it just was meant to be, as far as I would be concerned. But the other role then, AiPOS, it's chair of a technology startup. So it's point to sale software. And I also have been in a lot of startups in fintech and in banking. So that was through, when I went up there, I got in touch with the IOD and I said, I'm here, this is my skill set. And the lady who's in charge of the IOD there, Kirsty's fabulous, very well networked. And she just introduced me to a few people. And again, it was a really good fit. So that kind of is really how I kind of got started into full-time NED roles. I think I was very lucky, but I think sometimes there's synchronicity in things, that if you take the step, things will come to you. And I had always wondered, will I stay in executive? Am I playing it safe to be executive and non-executive? And at some point I was going to have to make the jump, because I don't know of too many people who go from executive straight into, building up a board portfolio straight away. I think it takes time, and I think sometimes you just need to make the decision and take the jump, and hope you've got the right qualifications and the right skill sets.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you did some preparatory work in that as well.
I suppose, yeah, it'll all make sense looking back, I'm sure, Sarah.
Yeah, definitely.
Like everything.
And Karen, you've sort of touched on it, but I know you're on the board of Triodos Bank, and I just wondered, like, how have your values flowed through the different board roles you've had?
Hugely. They really have, I suppose, and again, it's like I said, it might make sense looking backwards, but I think sometimes I did a diploma Women in Leadership back in 2011, I think it was. And I think I mentioned this to you before, but the very first weekend of that course, we were all kind of taken aside and we spent the whole weekend working in a very kind of excavational way on our values and what we thought our values were. And then we prodded that some more and discovered, what our real values were. And ever since then, I have had no, like before then, if somebody had asked me to do something and it seemed like, oh yeah, that's kind of maybe lofty, I'd go, yeah, okay, I would do that. Whereas, and maybe that's why I've kind of, committed to too many things in the past. But since that weekend and since that diploma in leadership, I have I don't have any problems anymore making decisions
Mm.
because does it fit my values? Can I contribute? And if the answer is yes to those, and I have the time, which is very important, then it's an easy decision to make. So I've always, in terms of financial services, I have always worked in either mutual financial services or I suppose ethical sustainability financial services or, in startups. Those are the kind of areas I am attracted to. And with startups, there's a common denominator across all of those, which is the right team of people.
Yeah.
And kind of not too political or hierarchical infrastructures. And then the other common theme, I suppose, is service and servant leadership. And, whether it's a not-for-profit or an NGO, it's just something where I feel my skills, I can contribute in a meaningful way. So that's kind of the theme. I also, I suppose, have a very green kind of sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
kind of strategic, you know, I want whatever I do, and I want the organizations I'm involved in to be doing good and to be thinking of things in the very long term rather than in terms of short-term shareholder needs and getting as much money out of the business as possible to give to shareholders. I'm really not interested in that. To me, it's about long-term value and your impact on the world around you. So though, I suppose that's really kind of a common theme throughout everything I'm in. So as you said, I'm on the board of Triodos, it just so fits my values. It's basically an ethical bank, but it's got a current account that, the money that's in your current and your savings account gets lent out to sustainable businesses like renewables, like social, like cultural. So that just fits, and I love being part of it and involved in that. And then the other thing, I just recently joined, actually, I'm only in it about a month now. I joined the board of the Voluntary Health Insurance of Ireland. So basically, that's the state's biggest health insurer, but it's community rated. So again, it's a mutual. So basically, if I'm 70 or if I'm 30, the cost of health insurance has to be the same to me. So you can't cherry pick kind of a younger cohort. You have to insure everyone. That has its challenges, of course, because you need to be viable and all the rest. But yeah, so that's
kind of attract a good mix.
Yeah, it's a lovely mix, and it's a mix too of insurance, banking, building societies, and fintech. So it really kind of suits. I'd have to say though, that's me though. I'm fairly full now at the moment. I've got 5.
Anyone watching this and thinking Karen's amazing?
Yeah.
Not
No.
available right now. Dance card is full.
And I'd say that's really, really important as well for Neds to just constantly ask themselves that question and challenge themselves, because my experience back in the art college that I mentioned was kind of a board in crisis. That wasn't a board in crisis, it was an organization in crisis. And the amount of time it takes to be an ed on an, or especially like I chaired the audit and risk committee, so it takes up a huge amount of your time, and you have to assume, even though it may not be the case, But COVID is a classic example. At the beginning, when COVID struck first, I was 24/7 on phone calls and in Zooms because everyone was trying to figure it out. So that was 5 organizations in kind of semi-crisis at the same time. But you have to assume that at least one will. And if you're doing a regulated NED role, the PRA will challenge you on that and will say you must only have a certain amount, because you have to assume at some point one will be in a crisis and
Yeah.
you need to give a lot more time. So just do bear that in mind.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And touching on that sort of time and commitment piece, Karen, how's it been for you being a mum and a non-exec? And I guess what would your message be for mums or soon to be mums that are considering that as well?
Absolutely go for it. It really, as I said, we moved up to Belfast, and we had a 9-year-old to settle in school. So, you know, the first few months I did that. But when I then took on the NED roles, what I found was it was super, because I could still drop her to school at 9 o'clock, pick her up at 3 and do the homework with her. And I might get a board meeting done in the morning, or the reading for a board meeting done, you know, another day. But also there's real board meetings are set a year in advance. So you know by the end of January what your diary is like, and then it's only ad hoc meetings that come up. So on days where you're particularly busy, you can plan to, you know, basically up the ante on the childcare, or, you know, get your other half, your partner, to help out, or find ways. But there's that predictability about it, which is great. Now the downside is sometimes you'll be working late at night, and sometimes you'll be working weekends. But you know, that's something I accept, because I can do my, you know, bring her to school, drop her home. Not that you get much chat or any appreciation of that, but I think now's the time that that's important, and I'm happy I'm able to do that. So I would say absolutely go for it. And I think as well, you know, we need, from a diversity and inclusion perspective, we need those voices more at the boardroom table, because we need people saying, no, we can't have a meeting on that date because that's the midterm break. Hello, you know, or, you know, that doesn't make sense because that's the time I can't do it. And the more people that are saying that, the better off we'd be. Like the CEO of one of the organizations I'm part of, she's fabulous. She doesn't talk as a figurehead in terms of diversity and inclusion, but what she does do is she'll send an email out if the schools are off because of something, and she'll say to all the men in the business, look, schools are off, encourage you to mind your child so that your wife can go to work, you know. And it's very subtle, but it's actually very, very powerful, because I think a big part of the challenge we as women have is sometimes we default to being the ones, you know, who will do the childcare, who will do, you know, the caring. And sometimes it's good for men to know, actually, you know, you can choose that too. It's subtle, but it's powerful, I think. And it's nice to see that. And I think the more voices at the boardroom table saying that, the more normal it really becomes.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, this has been an immense time, a challenge for that, because so many couples are trying to work out, I know you are, how to do homeschooling.
Yeah, it's not my forte, definitely not.
Karen, touching on something else then, have you ever had conversations about age and your role as a non-exec? Have you ever been challenged on being at the younger end of the scale for non-execs? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have, you know, sometimes, once openly, and the other time, I suppose, other few times I've had a suspicion that people are going like, she's a little bit young for this. I had one, it was actually at the beginning when I was thinking of going for a role, and I spoke to an Ed who had been on a previous board with me, and asked him, you know, what did he think? And he was like, oh, no, it's way too early for you, you know, you really need to think about, you know, not doing that. And I could have gone away and thought, yeah, maybe he's right, but I was a bit taken aback. And sometimes I need time to kind of think things through, and I mulled on this for a couple of days. And I suppose I kind of quickly realized that if I go for that role, I am competition to him. And of course he was going to say that. And, you know, and maybe it's not very politically correct for me to say this, but at the moment, the central bank and the PRA are pushing. Now is a good time to be applying for NED roles if you're a woman, because the regulators are pushing for this to happen, and I think politicians are beginning to do that too. And yes, it's difficult for men because sometimes, that they will be, something they think was just a slam dunk. Suddenly you've now got 3 female candidates and a male candidate. And it must be difficult to kind of be pushed kind of off the pitch a little bit. But at the same time, I think what's really powerful is it's not that women are being selected because they're women. It's they're being brought to the table, to be compared with the men, and a selection being made on that basis. And that's really, really good to see. So the more women that do that, the better. I mean, one of the things, funny, nothing to do with business, but one of the things I was involved in was an organization called Women for Election. And so I had no interest whatsoever in being a politician. It's a very, very difficult, horrible role. But only, I think, 16% of the Irish Parliament were females. And this to me was just completely wrong. So I was involved in an organization trying to get more women to run. And we ended up working with a fabulous lady who's now a minister. But she always said to me, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And one of the big reasons she wanted to run was she has 3 children, 3 small children, like her daughter's the same age as mine. And she wanted them to see that this is what can be done. But she always said it was just as important for her boys to see that as for her daughter to see that. So I think, if you've the skill set, if you have the interest, then you absolutely should go for these roles. And it couldn't be better time to be going for these roles than now, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you, Karen. That's an amazing encouragement for women, especially, and for younger people who are thinking about their first non-exec role.
Interestingly, actually, it's something that I only kind of came across last week. I was chatting to one of the chairs, and so the chair of an audit and risk committee, or chair of an audit committee, or the chair of a risk committee, you need recent and relevant experience. So in other words, you really should be an accountant, or you should be an actuary, and that's right and proper, I think, and it's set down by the regulator. But I think sometimes, interestingly, they struggle to find a woman who is an actuary or an accountant. And you think it's traditionally kind of the chair of the audit committee, the chair of the risk committee tends to be a man. So, in terms of, if you're a woman and you're an audit or an actuary, an accountant, or have been an auditor in a previous life, get out there and apply for these roles, because it's while there are lots of men in those roles, they want to start seeing chairs of these committees being female. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, in terms of skill sets that they're needing to start seeing on these boards, traditionally you see kind of females in HR or things like that. But what I'm seeing more and more is women in digital transformation, change and innovation. And all of those skills are really key now in boards. Digital marketing as well, that's another one that's really, really important, and customer.
And quite rarely represented on boards, I think.
Exactly, although I think that's really beginning to change. Like, so for example, Progressive particularly, we're looking for people with digital transformation experience. And I think if that's something you're doing and interested in, keep doing it. And then the other thing I'd say is, do try and get the qualification, because it really isn't just, it's not a tick box. It's like, as I said, learning to drive in a particular way. Your paradigm is very different as an ed. And, if you do the training and get the qualification, I think that does make a big difference as well. So invest in yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to invest in yourself. Don't just be bold and go, you know what, that's something I want to do. And there's plenty of ways to do that. Also get the experience in voluntary boards if you can.
Yeah, that's brilliant to hear that worked out so well for you as well, Karen, taking that route in.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can take the credit of saying I intentionally designed it.
I don't think anyone can. No one really plans. People say they do, but no one really plans careers perfectly. Well, Karen, thank you so much for your time and for encouraging and inspiring others. And if anyone's watching this and you think you're interested in non-exec roles, then please do have a look at Dynamic Boards. We've got about 60 live roles right now across the UK that you can have a look at and apply for. So Karen, have a good rest of your day. Lovely to chat to you. Take care.
All right, bye.